hear feedback today. Like, I want to feel like I'm not alone in the room. Thank you. Awesome. So they say that love at first sight does not exist. Well, I beg to differ. The first time I saw Kelsey, and we have a picture, I think, of when we first started dating. So this is our first year of dating. And she was 18, I was 19. Now, initially, again, I saw her, and immediately she captivated my heart, captured my heart. I did not capture her heart, though. And it took some time. It took quite a bit of time, longer than I was hoping for her to go ahead and lower her standards and agree to go on a date with me. And she did. We went on a date, and it was amazing. It was an incredible date. We were finishing each other's sentences. We just clicked, and we decided to just keep dating. And about 6 months go by, and we've been dating this whole time, and it's her birthday, and her mom decides to throw her a surprise birthday party at a roller skating alley. Do you remember roller skating alleys? Any kids of the 80s? My goodness. So this is just out of the 80s into the early 90s, and roller skating rinks are there. They're I don't know, those of you who are a little young, this is what parents would do. They would drive you to the roller skating rink and leave you there all day. It was like free childcare. Friday nights, heading to the roller skating rink, and you're working on your moves. You're going backwards. You got this stuff roller skating rink, man, in the 80s. So this is early 90s. No one's there by this. No one's there. We have the whole rink to ourselves. It's Kelsey, her parents, and a bunch, maybe 20 of our college friends, and we're celebrating Kelsey's birthday. She's turning the big 19er. Well, I've been waiting the whole time. Now, at roller skating rinks, they would do all right, this next song, all guys skate. So all the guys would get out there. We're throwing elbows, and you're skating around. All ladies skate for this next song. Michael Jackson starts going, and we're on the side watching the girls. Woohoo! Right? I've been waiting the whole time for them to say, this next song is couples skate. So it's couple skate. Kelsey and I are the only couple. The only place. All our friends go to the side. They're leaning on the rail, watching us, hooting and hollering. Woohoo! Kelsey and I by ourselves out there skating. And I just get this idea. I need to show off a little bit. I need to show my skills. So I get this idea because my friends they're hooting, they're hollering, woohoo! I'm trying different things. I decide I'm going to pick her up. I'm a 19-year-old kid. I still think, I can do anything. I have this beautiful naivety that only the young have. And I'm like, I'm going to pick her up, not remembering I have wheels strapped to my feet. So I grab her, and I pick her up, and I'm showing off, and I'm skating. My friends are like, yeah. I'm skating like this. Well, then I get the idea. What? To me, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. In my mind, I immediately pictured Olympic ice skating couples where the guy lifts the girl up over his head. And I'm thinking, I can do that. So here I am, my friends are hooting and hollering, and I take Kelsey, and I go, and I get her right here. And all of a sudden, the wheels on my feet were not agreeable. And I just went, and we went flying through the air in slow motion. Flying through the air, I land on my back, hit the back of my head on the wood floor. She lands on my shoulder. I immediately see stars, And our friends fall on the floor, laughing their faces, laughing and pointing over the bar. Ah! Idiot! Absolute idiot. What makes you think you could do that? Why would you think you could do that? That's insane. Yes, it's called brain damage. All males are born with it. In our 40s, it starts to go away a little bit for some of us. I thought I could, for literally months, I would walk into the cafeteria at college and my friends would see me and be like, bah! Like they could not get over the ridiculousness of my behavior. It could only be described with 2 words: delusion of grandeur. That's what I had. I had a bad case. Delusions of grandeur was kind of on my resume. I want to talk about a story this morning that is full of delusions of grandeur. You're going to love it. To be honest, though, delusions of grandeur doesn't even scratch the surface in this story. If you've been following along, this is our 4th week. We're in Daniel chapter 3 right now. Babylon sacks Israel. In fact, they've decided to take over the world. They have declared war on the world, okay? This is Babylon. So Israel is one of many nations who have been enslaved, captured, and forcibly brought to Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon, and in the story, he is our Hitler figure. He's not just a person who is having delusions of grandeur or is a deranged narcissist lunatic with extreme impulse control. Those descriptions would be very true. But what we see and what we have in Nebuchadnezzar is also just someone who is flat out evil. He is a wicked person, and he's out of control. And he's insecure, and he's desperate, and that's a really bad combination for a lunatic. So, he brings all these exiles from all over the world, right? And he doesn't just want them to worship the Babylonian gods. He starts getting the idea that he would like them to worship him. So he gets his people to construct a massive, huge, golden image and erect this image of himself. And he's going to bring people, he's going to put it in the stadium, and he's going to bring people in, and they're going to bow and worship to his image. And so they start building this big thing, and people are hearing about it in the streets. And Nebuchadnezzar doesn't just want us worshiping the Babylonian gods. He wants us coming in and bowing to that image. And what are we going to do? Well, Friday night is coming, and it's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These 3 teenage boys are on the schedule to go to the stadium, bow, commit their lives to that image, worship that image. Their friends are like, dude, we just went in and did it. What are you guys going to do? They're like, well, we can't bow. We can't worship that golden image. This is right now, we're in Daniel chapter 3. This story is in Daniel chapter 3. Already, just in 3 chapters, just in 2 chapters, God has proven over and over again, time and time again already, that he is with them, that he is the one true God, and he's going to go with them into the suffering. They're like, we can't bow and worship another God. Their friends are like, well, can't you just physically bow? But in your mind and in your heart, pray to God, pray to Yahweh, worship God. Just physically do it. They're like, no, we can't. Guys, we can't do that. Because God has actually called us to be set apart, to be salt and light in this really wicked and dark place. We can't just fake it. We can't just pretend. We're called to be holy. So they go to the stadium. It's Friday. It's the day. They go as ordered. Nebuchadnezzar is there. Stadium full of thousands of people. Exiles from all over the world. If you've heard the story, Nebuchadnezzar says, all right, when you hear the band kick in, when the music starts kicking in, right? When the drums start, and the harp, and the lyre, the electric guitar, when these things kick in, that's your cue to bow in worship to my image. So everyone does it. And there's 3 boys. If you're a kid, if you're a teenager, man, you want to talk about the peer pressure. If you're not even just a kid, the overwhelming pressure to just go with the flow, right? Everyone's doing it. And Nebuchadnezzar says this, if you don't do it in front of everyone, we're going to kill you. And not only are we going to kill you, this is going to be awful. We got a fire burning in the middle of this stadium, a furnace fire. It is massive, and we're going to throw you in it. And all of us are going to watch you burn. We're going to watch you fry. Everyone bows. These 3 boys don't. Word gets to the stage where Nebuchadnezzar is. Hey, everyone did this, but there's 3 kids out there. Nebuchadnezzar's like, oh, wait a second. Everyone get back up. Maybe there's a language barrier here. When you hear the music, again, I'm just going to tell you one more time. When you hear the music, you got to go down and worship. Everyone goes down again. The 3 boys, they refuse. And then if you look with me at verse 16, we'll pick up the story in Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they get brought up to the stage where Nebuchadnezzar is. He is getting ready to kill them. By this time, he is fuming angry. Remember, he is a lunatic. He's literally about out of his mind. And they say, these boys, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves. I mean, this is courageous. We don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Verse 18, but even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty. See, they're showing respect here, right? It's like when your kid talks back to you and goes, but I said please. I ain't doing that. Don't tell me what to do, please. Right? It's that kind of, they are puffing their chest. They are taking a stand. Your majesty. There's still a little fear here. Even if he doesn't, your majesty, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So Nebuchadnezzar says, all right. He's freaking out. He says, turn the furnace 7 times hotter than we normally do it. So people are watching this fire just get hotter and hotter and hotter. He tells the soldiers, these mighty men, he tells them, tie their hands behind their back, tie their feet. And he ties them up. And he says, all right, now pick them up, throw them into the furnace. So he does it. These men grab these boys and they chuck them into now the furnace is so hot that the soldiers, these huge soldiers, literally, while they're throwing them into this furnace, into this fire, they themselves, it's like an Indiana Jones moment. Skin is melting off. They fall to the ground dead themselves. That's how hot this thing is. It's hot. Something happens, though. Something amazing happens. Look with me at verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, so they're in the fire, men fall dead. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that were tied up and thrown into the fire? They replied, certainly, your master. He said, look, I see 4 men, and they're walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like the son of the gods. Looks like a son of the gods. So the king was astonished. He was astonished because the 3 boys, what they said would happen actually in fact happened. They weren't burned up. They shouldn't have lasted 2 seconds. The people who threw them in died. But not only does he see 3 figures in the fire, he sees 4, and they seem fine. Verse 25 says they're in there and they're just walking around. Can you see them? Like, imagine yourself, one of the exiles in the stadium, and you're looking in there, and the 3 boys are kind of in there, and they can't sit still. They're like, this is amazing. They're giddy. They're right in the middle of a miracle. This miracle is happening, and they're in there just freaking out, like, oh my gosh, you remember being a kid? You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, they can't sit still. They're in there going, like, they're like, dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Like, you can see them in there. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Right? You can see them in there. And they're like goofing off. And it doesn't really feel so bad, you know? Doesn't feel so bad. They're just hanging out. One of them starts cooking up a s'more. Another one's rubbing suntan lotion on. Like, they're amazing. They're like, you know, it really isn't the heat so much. It's more the humidity. And they're laughing. Like, this is amazing. Now, there's this ancient translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. And in the Septuagint, it's a really well-respected translation of the Old Testament. It's an ancient translation of the Hebrew Scriptures into Greek. Now, in the Septuagint, in Daniel chapter 3, verse 24, in the Septuagint, it says that Nebuchadnezzar, his attention was caught when he heard the 3 kids in the furnace singing praises to their God. That's an amazing thought. Like, if I were making a movie, the scene would be these huge soldiers take these kids, tie them up, throw them in. They themselves fall down and burn and die. And immediately, King Nebuchadnezzar turns his back to the furnace, puts his hands in the air and looks at the crowd and says, do you see what happens when you do not worship me? Do you see what happens? Do you see how powerful I am? And then all of a sudden, his attention is caught and he looks back over his shoulder and he's like, are they singing in there? Like, and he turns, and they're not only singing, they're singing to a 4th person in the fire. And dude is astonished. He's freaking out. Now, when I read this story, and to be honest, when most read this story, you would hear the story or read it in your mind, you would be like, man, this is obvious, it's a cool story, but it's obviously a fairy tale. Like, people don't survive being thrown into a fiery furnace. People don't survive being burned at the stake. This is impossible. And honestly, I would completely agree with you. By nature, I'm a skeptic. But I have experienced too much. Like, I would agree. And if it weren't for 2 things, 2 words, a 2-word phrase that I have heard throughout my life spoken by true followers of Jesus, and 2 words, this 2-word phrase that I see over and over throughout the narrative of Scripture, and the 2-word phrase is this, but God. Like, when my older sister was given 45 minutes to live because of a brain tumor, but God. When my mother was burned from head to toe with 3rd-degree burns and it wasn't healing for weeks, but God. Or when my wife was going to have another foot surgery and this was overwhelming to her, but God. Or let's go to the Bible. There's a whole bunch of stories. Let me just give you 2. One I already said. Paul and Silas are in a Philippian prison. and they are singing praises to God with no hope of ever getting out of this prison but God. 3 boys are thrown into a fire. They should be dead. But God. My mom taught us this vital life secret. From the time we were little, from the first time we got hurt and skid our knee, or got bullied at school, or whatever it was, my mom taught us this. You always worship God through the storm. Not just at the end, not just when life is good, through it. You worship, it actually will get you through that. You worship through the storm. And that's what these 3 teenage kids are doing. They're worshiping God, who goes with them through the fire. So Nebuchadnezzar is demanding worship, calling himself a god, and then the one true God actually shows up, and the boys can't help themselves. They must respond. They must worship. They can't just sit back quietly. There's no apathy in that moment. Are you insane? They can't sit still. They can't remain quiet. They must sing. They must dance. Can you see them in there? I don't know what they were singing. Maybe it was like, our God is an awesome God. It sounds kind of Hebrew. He reigns from heaven above. Remember that song? I don't know what they were singing, but you can see them singing. Now, here's the deal, though. Worship isn't just singing. They were worshiping God before they got into that furnace. They were worshiping God by not worshiping Nebuchadnezzar. Worship for them began when they remained standing. Worship for God started before they even got to the stadium, already decided to live a holy life. They were already worshiping. Worship isn't just singing. Worship is placing God at the center. I'm going to trust God no matter what. I'm going to worship Him through the storm. Worship is living a beautifully courageous life in the midst of difficulty. That's worship, regardless of where it leads. Amen all by myself. Come on. And these kids have been courageously worshiping God the whole story. Verse 25, he said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Where did the 4th man come from? Who's the person in there with them? Some say it's got to be an angel. Many say, no, this is Jesus. Really? Jesus? Jesus wasn't even born yet. Well, John 1 tells us that in the beginning was the Word, Jesus, and the Word, Jesus, was with God, and the Word, Jesus, was God. He always was. What if this person with the lads in the fire is the incarnate God? What if this is Jesus? The only one who went into the fiery furnace with these 3 boys, but also many years later went through the furnace of temptation and the cross. That's what he did. Jesus knew the furnace of pain and suffering and rejection. He went through the furnace of being beaten and whipped. And he went through the fires of the cross. And he goes through the fires and the suffering and the mess of this world with me and with you. And in the midst of life struggles and brokenness, it's easy to forget what God is like. And it's vital that we remember He is the self-sacrificing, all-loving God. He is the God who goes with me. He is there in the midst of it all. I love what Bono says about trying to find God. From U2, he says this: if you want to find God, He's in the slums. in the cardboard boxes where the poor play house. God is in the silence of a mother who has infected her child with a virus that will end both of their lives. God is in the cries heard under the rubble of war. God is in the debris of wasted opportunity and lives. And God is with us if we are with them. The theme of Daniel, I hope you're hearing it, so far really is the withness of God. These boys find out that God, the God they serve, that they can't help themselves but to worship, He's with them. Now back to the fiery furnace. What burned up? Well, the boys didn't. The boys' clothes didn't, not their hair. The only thing that burnt up were the ropes, the things that bound them. It's the only thing that burned up. The only thing that burnt up were the things that restricted and hindered them. And this is like God's glorious work of a furnace that He actually may allow you to go through. Maybe the difficulty that you're going through will be the very thing that God uses to burn up what is hindering you, what is holding you back, what is keeping you down, what is binding you up. Draw close to the Son of God in the midst of that furnace, and you just might walk out with your bonds burned up. See, these teenage boys were liberated in that fire. Look at verses 26 and 27. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. Can you imagine this? And the satraps, prefects, governors, royal advisors, they crowded in around them. Like they all just want to get there. Oh my gosh, like we've got to touch these boys. Like I can't believe this happened. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there wasn't even a smell of fire on them. This is amazing. Nebuchadnezzar looks in at them and says, "Servants of the Most High God." Now that is a change of tune. Earlier, he's calling himself a god. Nebuchadnezzar was all about worshiping himself. When you place yourself on the throne, when you cave to your every whim, when your philosophy is, I just want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, then you are just like Nebuchadnezzar. And I know you're a lovely person. You do great things around the church. You volunteer your time. You do awesome things around our community. But I got to tell you, you make a terrible God. You need a bigger God. In the story, King Me was now dethroned. This spectacle proved to the stadium full of people that the one true God wasn't a Babylonian God, wasn't Nebuchadnezzar himself, but was Yahweh, Israel's God. Now the story ends with three quick things happening. Nebuchadnezzar praises Israel's God. He makes a decree that if anyone speaks bad of Israel's God, that he will chop them into pieces and destroy their homes. Still a lunatic. 3, he promotes the boys by giving them position and power, and that's a dramatic ending. That's quite a turn of events. Nebuchadnezzar is still a tyrant and still clueless, and actually, he ends up losing his mind altogether if you continue his story. But the truth is clear. God is with us, and you can trust him. Whatever you're going through, I have found out this the hard way. There have been things in my own story, and many of you don't know my story. So much disappointment. There was a season where I just felt disappointed in God. You ever felt that? And somehow, if I remembered what my mom said and worshiped him through whatever it was I was going through, in discipline, in faith. Somehow, those difficult things God redeemed. I mean, that has been my story over and over. This is a skeptic whose faith, like, I'm a guy who did not come to faith easy. And even after I came to faith, continued to struggle, and yet I still see God showing up. And if I just would have trusted him through the storm, man, it would have made my life much less bitter. I remember when my wife had another miscarriage. We have one biological daughter. Because of many miscarriages, many difficulties carrying a baby. And this miscarriage, the one I'm thinking of, happened in about 2006, 2007. At that time, there was a really, every church in the country was singing a song called Blessed Be Your Name. It was a really popular song, popular worship song. Churches everywhere are singing it. My wife has just had a miscarriage. A couple days later, we are at church, and I'm standing in the crowd, and the band starts playing Blessed Be Your Name. And I'm just kind of naive, not really thinking of anything. Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful, where your streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name when I'm found in the desert place, though I walk through the wilderness. Blessed be your name. God, blessed be your name, whether I'm going through a really easy, wonderful, blessed time, and also, blessed be your name. I will worship you even if I'm going through the storm, even in the difficulty, even when my prayers seem unanswered, I will still lean in, I will still worship you, I will still trust you, I will bless your name. And they're singing this song, and I'm standing next to my wife, who literally 2 days prior had this horribly painful and difficult miscarriage that lasted days and days. I'm just looking at the band, and I look over at my wife, and she is standing there, and she is weeping, and she cannot sing. Those words are too meaningful, too powerful, and she's just overwhelmed, and she's weeping. And I look at her, and I'm just like, it's like all of a sudden I realized what the lyrics were. You ever just sung a song with it, just not even thinking? Like, oh wow, yeah, in the midst of difficulty, these words carry a lot more weight. These are significant prayers that I am singing to God. And what I ended up seeing was her work through that and start to sing. And it was a prayer. It was worship from her gut. You give and take away. You give and take away. But my heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. And Kelsey sang that and just wept. And then I got to watch her the next couple of years continue to worship God through the storm. And then I got to see God use her pain to minister to the women around her who had been through similar things. These boys' lives pointed people in that stadium to who God was. The God who kept his promise to be with them even in the midst of the difficulty, the hardship, the suffering, the furnace, the storm. May our lives be evidence. May our lives be worship. I'm going to invite the band to come back out. And if right where you're at, we could just kind of maybe close our eyes. God, I just thank you so much that you are present in the midst of our stories. that God, you are working even when we are unsure, that you are present even when we can't see you or sense you or feel you. You are with us. And I just pray right now, Father, that our lives would be a demonstration of what faith really looks like, that we would just turn to you, that we would worship you. God, I pray that those of us who have not opened our lives to you before, I just pray right now, right where you're sitting, God, I just pray that you would do a work. Maybe under your breath, you can say, God, I'm open to you. Jesus, work in my life. Come into my life and lead me. Maybe you can just say that to him. Jesus, come into my life. I want to know you. You lead, I'll follow. For those of you who are going through difficult times, I just want to invite you to invite God into that storm, into that fire, into that furnace. So Jesus, do a work. Amen.